I'm Jim Christensen. I've been looking forward to this more than you can imagine. I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about space, but talk about education and talk about kids. Now, I've got to switch gears a little bit because I've just come off talking to teachers, and now I'd like to talk to people who are like me. I didn't make a slide of my family, but I have two kids. I have a 33-year-old son who's an attorney in Denver, Colorado, and I've got a 28-year-old daughter who's a family and consumer science teacher in Ames, Iowa. And I've got one granddaughter who is just, you know how it is with grandkids, they're just unbelievable, who's about 15 months old. Our son and his wife are expecting a granddaughter in January. So my wife and I have been blessed beyond belief. Incidentally, my wife was 33 years a fourth grade teacher in Iowa, and now is retired, as am I. And then I took another job. I couldn't stand still. We, as grandparents, we have parents and grandparents, we've got such an interesting challenge because here we've got our kids and we want the best for them. We really want the best for them. And what do we do? And how do we inspire them? And how do we prepare them? And the world looks, hey, it's scary. But then there's also, there's a thing about the world that's so exciting. Interesting thing, and I'm not saying this in a religious sense, so don't get excited about this. I actually told our minister this one, and when I told him the context, he's okay. But Jim Lovell made a comment that he said, a quote where he said, the world, many people say, when I die, I want to go to heaven. And what they don't realize is when they were born, they came to heaven. And what he meant was the earth is the perfect place for people to live. And this is in the context of the idea of going someplace else to live. When we start talking about going to the moon to live, we have to make some real accommodations because we haven't evolved to live there. This is a hostile, it's a hot place, it's a cold place, there's no air, there's little water, there's all these difficulties. You go to Mars, same kind of thing, a much different world. Now, people are adaptable and people can create systems, but here we've got this beautiful, beautiful earth, and I keep looking at that over my shoulder, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so here we've got this challenge of inspiring our kids, and I think about how do we go about inspiring them, and we also think about how do we expose them to opportunities? Okay, I'm a little bit going in circles. Let's pull up the video of Where is the Moon? And let's show that video. It's the same one I showed with the teachers. But I'd like to just give you an idea. When we talk about going to the moon, what we're talking about in terms of distance. First, the moon is about 2,000 miles across. So it's about the size of the distance from London to Moscow, about that. And the distance is 10 rolls of the Earth. So if you roll the Earth 10 times, now that distance can also be measured in the amount of time it takes for light to travel from the Earth to the moon. And it takes 1.25 seconds. So what you were seeing in that video was you were seeing a person kick a ball such that it took about 1.25 seconds to go from the Earth to the moon. And so that's the scale, that's light speed, that's the distance. So this morning I went out and was looking up, and what do you know, I could see the moon in the daytime sky. And it's a long ways. But in terms of how far it is to the moon, and in solar distances, it is next door. It is in our back pocket. It's 1.25 seconds away. So let's compare that to the distance to Mars. So how about if you, Sam, pull up the Mars distance video, please. Okay, when Earth circles the sun, Mars circles the sun. When they're at their closest point, they're about 4 minutes apart in terms of a radio signal. So what I've done is I've worked this out such that these two girls are scale distance out from the sun, and Earth being closer goes around twice as fast. So when you would arrive, if you'd leave at that initial point, when you'd arrive at Earth, it'd be at the point that was just there. 6 months later, the Earth would be on the opposite side, and they'd be opposite each other. 6 months after that, Earth would be back to where it is in this diagram. And the amount of time it takes for a signal to go between these two places ranges from 4 minutes to 14 when it arrives, to 22 minutes when they're opposite. 6 months later, 14 minutes, and then 2 years after the initial launch, you'd be back to 4 minutes. And I know I kind of rocked through that quickly, but the challenges of going to Mars are really significant, partly because it is so far. Okay, so when I try to explain those distances, I try to come up with a scale model. And here's the problem with the scale model. You can't hardly do it inside of a classroom because of the size of the models. So I started out thinking I can take a ping pong ball and represent the size of the sun with a ping pong ball. If the sun is the size of a ping pong ball, you can't do it in class. It's too big, because literally the distance, whatever scale, whatever sun you use, you would roll that sun 34 times to get to the Earth. And it's just too big. At least it's too big to do Mars. It's not necessarily too big to do the Earth, but it's too big to do Mars in a typical classroom. One time I tried a tennis ball, and I had to do it in a gymnasium. If you were to take use a basketball, and you stood at the middle of a soccer field, you would be, well, in a football field in America, if you stood at the 50-yard line, Earth would be at about the 20-yard line, 30 yards away. And Mars, at its closest point, would be down about the 40-yard line in American football. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with that. I'm a big football fan. But I believe that would be about in the goal if you're standing in the soccer field. So you've got these incredible distances. But the thing that's even more remarkable is the size we're talking about. If the Earth, if the sun is the size of your thumb, the size of the Earth is, oh, let's see, you can't see it. Well, that's good, because it's the point of that pin. We are literally just this little speck of dust in comparison to the sun. The sun, in terms of volume, is 1.3 million times as much volume as the Earth. Now, I've always said it's about 1 million. Okay, so that's close enough for government thing. But if I were to take 1 million of these Earths and drop them, I could put about 1 million of them inside a sun. Now, what's kind of fun is I used to work in a city called Sioux City, Iowa, and on the east side of Sioux City, Iowa, there's a great big round water tank that held 2 million gallons of water. So what I did was I calculated out how big would the Earth be. Well, it would be like 2 gallons, which would be about this big. You could put 2 gallons in a balloon about this big. And how far away would it be? It would be about 4 miles away. Well, I thought that was kind of cool. So somebody asked me, actually a television station asked me about, well, where would Pluto be? They actually called me up, and I did a segment about distance Earth to Pluto, and Pluto was going to be a dwarf planet and all that. And it turns out it was like 54 miles away, and it was the size of one of those little stress squeeze balls. And you start thinking about solar distance, and you start thinking about the scale of the universe, and then you can go outside and you can look at these things. And there's a certain inspiration, but I think it's an inspiration that needs to be nurtured. And so as a parent and a grandparent, I just think it's the coolest thing to go outside, look up at the sky, and talk about these kinds of things, and then create models and build understanding with kids. So that's my first soapbox to stand on. The next thing I'd like to talk about, just a couple minutes, is the idea of how does space connect with your home. NASA has a website, Home and City, that I think is really worthwhile to take a look at, because what they've done is on this, they've created models of a city, and you can click different places on the city, and it will pull up information about technology that was created as a result of the space program. Now, when I say NASA created it, it was associated with NASA programs, but certainly there's a lot of people that it kind of falls under that NASA umbrella. I know when I go and travel, and I travel a lot in India, I always get introduced as being from NASA. Well, no, I'm from the Aldrin Family Foundation, and before that, I was from the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, and I was a contractor employee. But people kind of put together NASA. But if you go to this website, you can find all these technologies that had to do with space that resulted from trying to solve problems in space. There's also a section about in your home, and you can click to different rooms in your home, and it will come up with hotspots where it will explain technologies that you use. Now, what kinds of things? Well, communications, lights, the GPS is a good one. It just goes on and on and on, the kinds of things. And I think so many times what happens with kids is kids look at something in their home and you just take it for granted. I certainly do. People don't think about like how much energy it takes to light a light bulb. You know, we put the idea of how much energy it takes to flip the switch with how much energy it takes to run the light. And that's not the case. There's so many misunderstandings of science and so many opportunities just within a home. But I think a good place to start is with this Home and City NASA website, and take a look at it and see what it is that's in your home and talk about where it came from. Okay, so the next soapbox I'd like to stand on is a program that we've gotten started. And what we did, we were working with the Department of Defense and the Air Force, and have established a Patrick Air Force Base Starbase Academy. And in this particular slide, this is a picture of one of our classrooms. Now, we did not create Starbase. Starbase is a program that the Department of Defense has created, and they've got a very specific STEM-related curriculum. But what they do is they go out and they look for different organizations to run these classes, and they contracted with us to do this. And so what we do is we bring students into Starbase for it's 5 days. Now, they're not there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What they do is they come in, say on Monday, and then 3 weeks later they come in and they do day 2, and a couple weeks later they come in and do day 4. But we'll do a couple weeks of day 1 with schools from around our area. There's a lot of kids in our area, and these kids will come in, spend a day doing activities, and then the next day we do the same activities with another set. And initially we'd have 25 kids in a room. Now with COVID, we've cut that number down to 12, but we're operating and we're taking very severe kinds of precautions. But we operate this with the idea that we show kids how engineering works, how science connects with this. We do all kinds of really rich kinds of activities. And you can see from the classroom, these classrooms are just beautiful. Just love this place. Okay, the next thing I'd like to talk to you just a minute about is the Aldrin Foundation has come up with the idea of creating space, what we call Aldrin Space Education Hubs. What we've noticed is when we place a map in a location, it helps if people in that location gather together. They connect in some way. They create kind of this social network between them that's a professional learning network where they can share their best practices, where they can talk about issues, where they can brainstorm ideas. And what we typically do is we try to find a college that has a really strong education program to be a part of this, not so much to lead it, but to be a partner with these schools. Now, right now, we're working with a University of Sunderland, and they're working with us to build this space hub in Northeast England, and we're really excited about that. Now, there are many great partners, RTC North being one of those great partners. But we have a lot of connections. Aldrin Foundation has lots of connections, and we like to share these connections, and having a space education hub and location allows us to a mechanism to work with schools, because I'm one guy, and I get to work all across the world, and all across the world is what it is. We've got a project going in Australia right now. We've got a project going in Chile. We've got projects a couple places in the United States. I get pulled lots of directions and love every minute of it. But when we can get things local, that is the very best, because every place has slightly different needs. Okay, so that's the thing we're doing. And I tell parents and grandparents this because I just want you to know what the opportunities are. And I also need you to know we're a not-for-profit foundation, so we operate basically on donations. And so we appreciate the support we get. Okay, now I'm finally to the place where I was really excited about being, and I just got done talking about this with the teachers. But we've got a program. Wrong slide. Let's go to. Let's just find a different slide. Okay, I love going to the moon with these slides. This is actually a slide that illustrates the idea of a city on the moon. Up until the middle of March this year, I was traveling a lot. My car probably parked more at the Orlando airport than it parked in my garage. And I was just going and going and going. And suddenly, all that just crashed suddenly. And I was home. And I'm used to travel, and I like travel, and oftentimes my wife goes with me. And I was sitting in my office one day, and I just thought, I might as well be on the moon. And then it hit me, I might as well be on the moon. And I sat down and wrote up an outline where I made a backstory. I told a story of, we've been to the moon, we've returned to the moon. I'd projected a couple of years in the future that the Artemis project's there, and we've established a North Pole science station, a South Pole logistics station, and an orbiting station. I called them the Armstrong Science Station, the Alder Logistics Station, and the Collins Gateway. You know where those names came from. And the idea was to ask kids, the story went on to say, it's getting to the place where tourists want to visit the moon, and that we're worried that tourists are going to take little field trips up to the Apollo landing sites and kick dirt on the footprints. You know, there's nothing, everything is exactly the way we left it on the moon right now. And so how do we protect them? Well, let's ask families to build homes at each one of these sites with the idea of protecting and preserving. Basically, they'd build a fence around the site and then just kind of be there and kind of be the caretakers of that site. Well, what would that take? Well, the first thing, what you need to do is you need to think about, what do you need to survive? Well, here's what I need. I need air, I need water, I need food, I need energy, and I need shelter. That's what I need here in Titusville. What would I need on the moon? Same thing. How much do I need? I can measure it. I can figure out how much air, how much oxygen I use. I can figure out how much carbon dioxide I produce. I can figure out how much water I use. People are typically shocked by the amount of water you use. And how much you drink is a small fraction of how much you use in a day. And how much waste do you produce? Well, I used to teach middle school, and It's really fun to think about middle schools measuring waste. I just laugh thinking about having my students do that. But you can measure all of these different things. Then you start thinking about what systems in your house provide all these things, because you got a system for every one of those, because you're surviving. So there's a way this is happening. Now, of course, you can get your air by opening the window, but I'm kind of betting that you probably have a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system in your house. At least if you live in Florida, you do, because today it's 30 degrees C and our humidity is high enough it feels like 35. And this is middle of October. You know, this past summer, it's a lot hotter in the summer down here. This place is a hot and humid place. Now, get in the middle of the winter, this place is heavenly, but it's not middle of the summer. It's not middle of the winter yet for us. But all these systems exist in your house. So it's an opportunity for kids to consider, how do things work in your house? How does that electricity get in there? You know, how much energy do you actually use? How much food do you actually use? Where does this food come from? How much waste do you produce? Where does it actually go? How could it be reused? How could you recycle? You can enter into all these kinds of discussions. And what I imagined was families sitting around the table talking about these things. And the other thing I was imagining was families sitting around the table thinking that you've got a kindergarten student, a third grade student, and an eighth grade student. Okay, there's a wide span. How do you make it so that each one of them at their own level can contribute to a project? One of the things I see happening is that it's hard sometimes to communicate to somebody who is diverse from your background. And how do we get better at doing this? By practice. How do we practice that at home? Because by definition, you're not very diverse in your home typically. Well, you take the diversity of age and development and you use that, and you help build respect between expressing opinions between the kindergartner and the eighth grader, and help value each other, you know, and work on those kinds of social skills in this project. I really started thinking about how that works, and there's some suggestions about that in the materials. But we call this project Home on the Moon, and the idea here is you're going to design a home to be at an Apollo visitor complex, or pardon me, at an Apollo landing site on the moon. Okay, so let's see, make sure I got all this. All of this is available on our website at aldrinfamilyfoundation.org. And it's on our front page, and you can find Home on the Moon if you're interested in this. Now, when we put this out, we made some announcements. I don't know exactly how these announcements got made, but our communications team apparently did a heck of a job with it, because we got people signed up from literally around the world, and it just amazed me when I'd see the sign up. There's times I come out and say, hey, somebody from Pakistan signed up for this. How cool is that? Somebody from Australia. Oh, we got some Canadians. You know, we had some people from England, we had some Chile, we had Colombia, we had across the United States. The other thing we did with it is I said, if you send me your project, I'll take the top projects and I'll give you a prize. And we arranged with a company called Astro Reality to sponsor, and they gave us a bunch of these globes, and we gave away a bunch of these globes. They're called lunar proof globes. These things are cool. They've got texture of the moon, and they're just neat to hold. The other thing was I couldn't give a lot of those because they're about $200 a piece. We also had, we gave away notebooks. Now, I don't have a moon notebook left. I've got a Mars notebook here at my house, but these notebooks are pretty neat. Now, of course, that's past, but projects like this aren't about prizes. Projects about this are an opportunity to work with kids, an opportunity to help them understand their environment, how things work, and then project that onto the moon. You know, how do you have to change the systems to make it work on the moon? And if you go to the project page, you'll find there's a number of different videos that we've created, 5 different videos that explain how to do it. And what we what we ask is that you don't have to do it our way. Every family is going to approach these kinds of projects in a little bit different way. And who's right? Everybody is. Do it your way. Think about it. What I would hope is a family might start into the project and all of a sudden get really interested in food production, and they plant themselves a garden. What a wonderful thing. Okay, so that is the Home on the Moon project. Now, I've got a little clip that I'd like to get Sam to play of Brooke with Home on the Moon at this point. And what this is just one of the projects that came in. Okay, here we go. This is Brooke. Brooke's in 6th grade. She's about 11 years old, and she is remarkable. This kid is so bright. And she worked with her family. And let's see. We should get, yeah, we're going to get a little bit of motion here in a second. This is the initial 5 seconds of still picture. There we go. What she did was she built this model of what this home would be like. And she built it out of recycled items in her house. Now, I got a range of projects from people, this being just one of them. But I had a number of people that created 3D models with 3D modeling software. I had some people that came up with projects where, I can't think what the software is, but they built a house for me. And you could walk through the house, all 3-dimension. You could navigate through it. I had some that built like architectural models and took pictures of them. There was just a range of things. I had a high school in Columbia that as a high school class, they created this big project, and they organized teams to do this. And it was just remarkable what they came up with. But what the high school teacher did, and I just felt the guy was just genius in this, was he went out and found a structural engineer and found a psychologist to work with them. So one of the things they did was they had a whole section about psychological issues of living on the moon and isolation, which I found to be really fascinating. There was a section about PTSD, which, I hadn't thought about that one. But really cool. And then we had one group. It was a group of professionals that were taking part in a moon analog simulation in Krakow, Poland. And they found Home on the Moon and thought this would be a good thing for us to do. And they designed a hospital. And they sent me over a 100-page report on what they came up with in their hospital. So the idea was you could do this in a diverse kind of a way. And I guess my message is, I look at families and just think, we want to do something cool for our kids. I think helping them to understand how we live now and how that would translate to a new place, and that in the translation, it proves that they understand it. They can take what they know and they can apply it. A higher order thinking skill, I think it's worth the time. One last piece to that is, and I feel like I'm on a soapbox, but I guess I get to be, a huge issue for us is working with other people, communication and collaboration. Communication is tough for everybody. You know, the illusion that communicate, that's easy, but actually to clearly communicate is a difficult thing, and to collaborate is a difficult thing. But we need those skills so badly. As we look at our politics right now, we so need to be able to find those ways to work together and collaborate together. And I think about Moon and Mars and think about that eventually when people live on those places, and I have no doubt they will, everything we do on Earth, we're going to be doing there. And one of the things is we're going to be governing ourselves. And what does that mean? What rights do people have? How should you go about governing? And it's an interesting kind of an idea. Right now, of course, moon resources are really governed by a treaty from 1967 that says you can't own anything in space. Well, we say that, but the United States kind of feels like we own the Apollo landing sites. At least I think we'd be pretty unhappy if somebody went up and messed them up. it's interesting. There's a lot of law that needs to come about, and it's a worthwhile discussion. Okay, so I'd like to do one more thing. We came up with another project, and it's called We Came in Peace, the Apollo Visitor Complex Project. And the idea of it is it's kind of a step beyond family, the home on the moon. But the idea was to ask kids to consider what it would be like to build a museum at Apollo landing site. The idea that you've already got these family home outposts there. Well, the next thing is you build a museum. People are going to flock to Tranquility Base to see the footprints. Well, how are you going to protect and preserve them? So the first thing, the goal would be to be able in a museum to design displays that tell the science. What's the science? What do we learn up there? The second thing is to build displays that say, why in the world did we go? What was the historic context of going to the moon? And what's the whole story? And then finally, build the actual museum, the architecture of it, so it honors the mission. So that you look at this building and you say, hey, that is about Apollo. That is about Apollo 11. What should something like that look like? And the goal of being protecting, preserving, and telling the story and honoring. Okay, so that's what this project's about. Again, you can find that at aldrinfoundation.org. Okay, so one last thing, and I did this in the opposite order with our teachers, but for parents and grandparents, one of the things that we have that we send out to schools are maps, giant maps. And let's just find. And Sam, you know what's coming next. I'm going to ask for the video of the giant moon map. But we've created these maps. In this case, it's either 15 foot by 15 foot, or it's 25 by 25. And these lay out on the floor. Kids can walk on them. We do activities with them. I'm going to move my earth so you can see the map a little bit better. Sam, go ahead and run that video. Here's what it looks like down at, this is in our Starbase location. It's a topographical map. One of the things we added to it was we put in a timeline across the bottom. So you can look up and see all the different missions that have gone to the moon. Another thing we did was we worked with Astro Reality to create augmented reality where you can aim a device at locations on the moon and up pops information. And this young lady is looking at the Apollo 11 sticker and it brings up specific information. In this case, it was keyed to a crater and could pull up. But we've got a lot of different information on this map. And these maps go to schools. Okay, the next one, why don't you go ahead and pull up the Mars map. We also have the giant Mars map. For some reason, this did not focus well when I did this, so I apologize for that. Again, 25 by 20, well, actually, we changed the sizes. I'll tell those in a minute. But what it does is it gives features on Mars, and we have these globes that when you look at a big flat map, it's easy to say, oh, Mars is flat. No, Mars is not flat. Mars is a globe. So what we like to do is connect that globe and those locations on the globe to those places on the map. Another thing we like is that we've got scale Earth, scale Moon, scale Mars, and you can see we're doing very accurate measurement in comparison, and they step it off. We have a chart of everything that's ever landed on Mars, and we have information in both metric and English. And I told the girls that they were my models for this. I told them I'd put their pictures up, and they were a wonderful group of kids. And that was the only time all day that they didn't have their masks on. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that Aldrin Family Foundation are doing. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And right now we've got some time for some questions and answers. So Dallas. let's go back to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Jim. That's great. Lovely to hear you talk. I enjoy it so much. Hey, listen, it was interesting actually, just talking about the sort of problems that you've encountered, and I suppose we talked a little bit about the kind of the politics of the day at the moment and how much politics has affected education generally in science. I just wondered if you could sort of reflect on that a bit more. We're in such a weird political place at the moment, especially in America, and I'm just wondering how that sort of filters into your work.
Well, there's wonderful people. I have to be so careful, but
yes, you do, and so do I as well.
I have dear friends that stand in a different place on the continuum in terms of politics from me, and they're still my dear friends. But I also know people that reject others that aren't precisely at the same location politically. And I think our challenge is to build those bridges and try to focus on issues and try to take personalities out, but really talk about issues, because legitimately there's different ways to look at things. We've got 360 million people in the United States. We've got a range of people. So yeah, I don't want to. I feel like I'm in a debate and I'm trying to dodge the question, but we owe it to kids to train them to think for themselves. And to be able to judge the accuracy and validity of information. That's, I think, the single most important thing we can do for kids is help them be a judge of information.
You're absolutely right. I suppose I was wondering, you've had a long career in education, and as someone who sort of worked in school, have you sensed a change in the kind of mood from an educational point of view, the way that we talk to kids, the way that it's all just become rather shouty at the moment in terms of the politics of everything?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of that, but I think there's a lot of mature people that recognize that that's not the way you work with kids. And I think there's a lot of people that recognize that's not how you work with people either. I think we need to settle and be able to look each other in the eyes and talk. And I think there's an awful lot of people that recognize that. And I'd like to be an example of that, but I'm just one example. There's millions and millions of people that I think have that same sense.
All right, we've got a couple of questions. I've lost my glasses, so I can't read them. Where did I put my glasses? Most of my life is now spent looking for my glasses. I'm of that age, and then normally they're sort of, I find them actually in my head.
You are old enough to have seen the moon landings. Okay.
Well, I was born right in the middle of Apollo. I was born in 70, so I missed 11, 12, and 13. I was around for 14, 15, 16, 17.
Well, for what it's worth, I was born in 1957 when Sputnik. And I had a teddy bear named Sputnik.
We can measure the entire history of spaceflight through your life.
I am literally a space baby, and my mother used to say that I was just a terror getting into things, except when there was a launch on television. That even as a young child, I would sit in front of the television and watch the entire mission.
Yeah.
And they said, this kid's something's off with this kid.
Does your love of space exploration, did that come, do you think, because you grew up in Florida?
Oh, well, actually, I grew up in Nebraska. If you put your finger right in the middle of the map, that's where I live, and there's not a lot of people up there. I only dreamed of Florida and Kennedy Space Center, and now I live here. But it was I was fascinated by airplanes, and I had an opportunity to get a pilot's license when I was in high school. Went on, got an advanced license on instrument rating. I had those kinds of opportunities, but I don't know what it was. Now my classmates kind of laugh, but we figured you'd do something like this. I got to be a mission director out here. People are saying, we knew you were headed that way.
I'm always interested in speaking to people, not just astronauts, but everyone who's interested in space. Like, what was it that really ignited their passion? And quite a lot of people that I've been speaking to today said it was simply the act of lying down on the ground and looking up at the night sky and just being sort of filled with that sense of perspective, that sense of a sort of poetry that you get when you stare deeply into the stars and the universe reveals itself. There is something quite special about that.
You know, where I grew up in central Nebraska, there was very little light pollution, and you could see the Milky Way, and it's stunning. It's just stunning to do that. But I've always wanted to be able to look out the window back at the atmosphere. That's a thing that I've so wanted to do. It's a goal.
Yeah.
Another goal was to float in microgravity. A couple of years ago, NASA gave me the opportunity to fly on the reduced gravity aircraft that everybody in the world except NASA calls the Vomit Comet.
Yes.
And, oh my, was that fun! That is the most unbelievable thing.
Did you vomit? That's the question.
No, I did not.
Oh, that's quite good.
I literally choked myself on the last parabola, because what happens is you can avoid sickness. First, they say they can tell who's going to get sick before you get on the flight. One of the people operating the flight will come up and say, "Well, how do you feel? What do you think?" And if you say, "Oh, I'm a little worried about it. I think I might get sick," you're going to. It's part of your expectation. The other thing is, when you move, you can get your semicircular canals kind of mixed up. So if you make a sudden head movement, it'll tend to make you sick. So what people will do on the flight, they'll come up and tap you on the shoulder, and you go, and it's, oh no, what a mistake. Yeah. Right at the end of the flight, I twisted my head fast and I got a little bit upset, but I didn't throw up.
I was lucky enough a few years ago. I went up in a fast jet. We were filming and we did a sort of series of pretty hair-raising maneuvers, and luckily the pilot had put lots of sick bags everywhere, and I was almost right on the edge of throwing up, and I just managed to hold it in just in case. But one of the many reasons why I'd be a terrible astronaut is I'd probably vomit everywhere. Well,
about 60% of the astronauts would vomit when they first went into orbit, because microgravity is a really weird feeling. I told myself that, I give a lot of educational presentations, and I always thought, how do you describe microgravity? And when I was I worked in the astronaut office for a time, and every astronaut I'd get to know, I'd say, "Hey, what's it feel like?" And every astronaut had exactly the same answer. They'd say, "You can't describe it." Yeah. And then I'd have the same response. Costs $10,000 a pound to get you up there. Please describe it.
Yeah, exactly.
So finally, somebody says, "We got to get you on a reduced gravity aircraft." So I get on this thing. I go through the training. I get on this thing. And I say, "I'm not getting off until I can describe it." So I go through the experience. At the end of the flight, I'm sitting in the seat. We land, and I'm not unbuckling. And somebody says, "Jim, it's time to get off now." And I can't figure out how to describe it. And it's like, oh shoot, you really can't describe this. So I walk out the tail cone of the airplane down the steps, and I'm a little bit hyper, and I jump the last two steps. And I'm glad I did, because as I jumped, I realized that the experience of falling those last two steps was exactly what it felt like, except for one thing. And the thing was, in the airplane, you don't feel like you're moving. So microgravity to me is, put in one ear, you're falling, and put in the other ear, you're not moving. And if you can meld those two feelings, that's microgravity.
Yeah. So
I go on, I'm down here at Kennedy Space Center and education director, and the astronaut of the day was that program was under my wing. And so I'd meet all the astronauts. And one time, one of them, I said, "Hey, here's how I describe microgravity." He says, "Boy, Jim, I like that. Can I use that?" Well, yeah. So I tell another astronaut, he says, "Jim, I like that. I'm going to use that." Okay. So I tell 4 astronauts, and finally I tell the 5th astronaut. And this astronaut looks at me, and she says, "Didn't feel like that to me." So I say 4 out of 5 dentists, 4 out of 5 astronauts agree. There's an advertisement that.
There you go. I think that sounds pretty good. It was interesting. We were talking to Kathy Sullivan early today, and it was her. She's had such an extraordinary career, not just as an astronaut, but the fact that she's been an oceanographer and has dived. And actually the similarities, I suspect she's drawn to being underwater as the same reasons why she's drawn to being into space. There's obviously parallels. Anyone who's done scuba diving can probably get a rough idea of what it must be like to be doing a spacewalk if you're sort of perfectly neutrally buoyant.
Yeah. The whole idea that you can be in different orientations and not falling. But
Yeah.
Microgravity, the difficult thing in microgravity for me was maintaining a position. You just float away. Yeah. And you think, oh, I'm going to be Superman and fly. I literally, at one point, pushed off the back of the airplane and I wanted to fly like this. And instead I flew like this. Yeah. And it's pretty funny that you can't control yourself. Of course, there's people on the airplane that are there to keep you safe. Yeah. And they grab you, they put their hand on the ceiling, hold themselves, grab you by the waist, and they'd say, get control of your body. And they were saying that to me fairly often.
I think you might be in luck though. Talking to Andy Aldrin earlier today as well, we went through the kind of various options for civilians like you and I to experience that overview effect. Whether it's a trip on, if you've got very deep pockets, you can go on Virgin Galactic or Jeff Bezos's, his particular suborbital thing. But also, I like this idea of this balloon that will take you. Have you heard of this? This great balloon that'll take you up to the stratosphere or to the edge of space, or not quite the edge of space, but I'm not quite sure how high it goes. Quite high.
It goes up about 100,000 feet. Yeah, 100,000 feet, about 20 miles, and that will reach above almost all the atmosphere. You're above half the atmosphere in terms of density at 18,000 feet. So 100,000 feet, you're way up. They're planning to launch those from about 7 miles from my house. Yeah. Now, even that I'd have to give up my sports car to do it, and I kind of like my. I wish I could fly. I think it would make a huge difference to everyone if they could see the Earth and that.
Well, that's it. Maybe we should have a presidential debate on board some kind of spacecraft, just to give our politicians a little bit of a sense of perspective, which is what I think we need. Actually, my favorite story in all of space history is the Joe Kittinger story, who did the famous balloon jump. That must have been in the early 60s, I think, who went up to, I think, about 100,000 feet on a helium balloon, got an incredible view, and then decided to jump out. I always thought that was a rather good.
Yeah, he didn't just decide at the last minute.
He didn't just decide. He always knew he was going to jump out, but it's still a kind of crazy story.
Yeah. Let's see. Who was it? Fearless Felix Baumgartner. I watched that.
Correct.
When he jumped out. And then since then, it's been done a couple, well, maybe not a couple times, but I think it's been done again.
Once, the Google. One of the Google guys.
Yeah. Pretty remarkable. Interesting thing, back in the 1930s when they first started doing this high altitude balloon research, they were launching these balloons from this, they called it the Strata Bowl, out in the middle of the United States in South Dakota. And it was just this big, deep canyon, about 500 foot deep. So one day we're on vacation and I see a sign that says Strata Bowl. So we drive down to this place and my family's just saying, what in the world? Where are we going? It's this little bitty road that wraps around this canyon. And you get to the bottom and you try to picture this. It's amazing. I'm sorry, we're way off the topic.
No, we are a bit off the topic, but it's good. I like to talk about you talking about flying. It just reminded me of those kind of pre-astronauts, those balloonists. Here's a question for you. This is a question from Jim. We've had this question a couple of times today, actually, but it's a Jim wants. Oh no, it's not from Jim. It's to Jim. It's from Lacey, and Lacey wants to know: are aliens real? Is there life on other planets? Well, This is why we're in this business, to answer this question, I think, really.
What an incredible question. I love this question. And the truth is, I get asked this really often. And almost always what happens is I'm in front of a group of kids. I'm standing in the middle of the Mars map, and I'm answering questions, and somebody says, are there aliens? And almost always the teacher starts going over to kind of give them the look. Like, I can't ask that. But the truth is, that is the ultimate question. how can you look up into the sky and not wonder what's out there?
Mm.
And so what I'd like to answer with is, let's think about how big the universe is. If you want to just model the size and distance of stars, if you take 4 golf balls and just randomly throw them out the window of an airplane across the continental United States, that's the density of stars in our galaxy.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. 4 golf balls across all of you. We're a big country.
Yeah.
And each one of these stars has the possibility of planets, and each one of these planets could potentially have life. Now, what's this life look like? Is all life like our life? I don't know those things. My sister is a Presbyterian minister, and we often talk about this. What does this mean? The possibility of life someplace else. So my answer is, I don't have a clue. But that's one of the reasons we go different places. Here we find evidence there may be life, some form of life in Venus's atmosphere. Holy smokes.
Was that big news? That was sort of pretty big news here in the UK. I mean, the lead author was from a university here in the UK, from Cardiff. So it had a particular kind of relevance for us in the UK, but I don't know how it resonated across the UK, the US.
Well, in the United States, the news cycle is really fast. So it probably resonated for several minutes in the United States, right. Which, yeah, that's kind of how it works. But people that are interested know this. If or when we find life someplace else, if we were to find evidence of life on Mars, I think it would be fair to say there's life lots of places. If we don't find evidence there, we just keep looking.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think, as a teacher as well, and like you, I spend a lot of time in schools talking to young people about space. Perhaps more than anything is the story of our search for life. And we can go all the way back to talking about people like Frank Drake and the Drake equation, and Carl Sagan and the Voyager spacecraft, and all these great stories. And for me, I think that Venus story was particularly interesting because here we are. It's our closest neighbor. I mean, here we are thinking about Mars all the time. And actually, the idea that there could be life high in the clouds of Venus. I remember reading about that in a book when I was a kid, the possibility of life in the clouds of Venus. And the fact that it's actually been seen with our scientific instruments is incredible.
At least the evidence of the chemical that would be associated. Yeah. Really cool stuff. But
I'm looking forward to the James Webb telescope going up. When the James Webb telescope, for those who don't know, of course, this is the latest space telescope that's been promised for a long time and has had all kinds of terrible setbacks. But when that telescope, goes up, I mean, Hubble has revealed the universe in such extraordinary detail and has been wonderful. But the James Webb we'll be able to look at exoplanets and look at the atmospheres of other exoplanets, and that's, I think, it's going to change everything again.
The one disadvantage of James Webb is it's a radio telescope. And so you're not going to get these beautiful pictures. And people love beautiful pictures, although the data will get transformed into images. Yeah. It's a good way to study. But James Webb, plus it's just this huge object, and it's going to be 1 million miles away from Earth. And it's what an accomplishment.
Yeah. No, it's an extraordinary thing. It's a story that I follow a lot. There's a few. I have to go really close because I can't read the screen because I've lost my glasses. Lots of people saying thank you. Lots of people with their saying, "Oh, if we're talking about politics, let me reach for the wine." Someone's saying.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't want to drive anybody to drink.
No, well, it's sort of driving everyone to drink at the moment. It's such an interesting topic, and it kind of dominates everything at the moment. It's pretty odd, but there you go. So listen, we're in this extraordinary time with COVID, and I'm so happy to hear that you guys are still forging ahead, doing amazing work, and you have big plans for the future as well. I mean, the Aldrin Foundation is kind of expanding and doing amazing things. And
Yeah, we are. Well, of course, the big thing, one of the big things is the Aldrin Space Education Hubs that we're working with, and we're
Yeah.
doing these around the world. And I'm fortunate to get to go to these places. But the thing right now, we can have all these future plans. What are we doing right now? And
Yeah.
both Andy and I have been talking at conferences this way, and it's remarkable that this is unbelievable. I'm talking to you a quarter of the globe away. I understand that there's people around the world that could potentially be listening to us. I think we need to embrace what we can do right now.
Yeah.
And there's some ways that Zoom and video conferencing have really helped us advance.
It's been well. It's forced everyone in every industry across the world, particularly teachers, and to have to be creative and have to adapt to the situation. So, it's amazing the kind of work that you continue to do. I want to say a huge thank you. You've been with us for a couple of hours today, and it's been absolutely delightful to hear you talk. And it's just so refreshing to hear your energy, and you're so passionate about what you do, and it's been really fun chatting. So I wanted to say a big thank you. I know there's been lots and lots of schools that have signed on, and lots of teachers, particularly watching, who you will have changed how they perceive this subject, and I think that's a very valuable thing.
Well, thank you so much, Dallas. You do such a nice job of this. It's just been an absolute privilege. I am wearing down a little bit. I have been on 2 hours now. Hey, I'm tired.
I've been doing it. I was on since 9 o'clock this morning. It's now 6 o'clock, so I've been going much longer than you have.
It's almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon here. I'm gonna get in the car and drive out and get some pizza here.
Go get some pizza. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks again. And I'm sure people will be able to watch this back and get in touch with you and order maps galore and everything else. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jim.
Last thing, real thanks to RTC North and all the people that work so hard to put this together. And thank you.
Brilliant. And thanks to Andy as well. Thank you. Okay, take care.
Thank you.